and welcome back to our series of interviews with our amazing members all over the world. I am delighted to be back with Jenny Hogan, the Relocation Consultancy. Jenny, you and I have spoken twice, which has been great. And I love the fact that we can continue these conversations because there's a continuity about, you know, how this has progressed through our lives. So tell me, first of all, how are you?
Yes, very well, thank you very much. Yes, all fit and healthy in this household, at least. I have heard, we were talking earlier, I've heard of more and more people testing positive for COVID, which is probably was always going to happen because the testing is much more than it was back in March. But generally speaking, I've not heard of anyone taken seriously ill, you know, a few days in bed or, you know, literally just losing sense of taste. But
yes,
generally speaking, all very good here, thank you.
Good, I'm very glad to hear it. And I mean, you know, I know very well where you live because it's also, you know, where I was brought up. What was before, well, let's put this into context. What's happening now in the UK?
Well, as you have probably, or most of the listeners have heard, we've just been told at the weekend that we're going back into lockdown again for a month from Thursday. So by all accounts, it's not such a severe lockdown as it was in March, as I understand it. And obviously, anything that comes out of the government at the moment is subject to interpretation. But as I understand it, is that they're trying to cut down on the socialising element of the population, but trying to keep businesses open apart from, you know, shops and places where people will meet. So, for instance, from our point of view, the housing market is remaining open this time, whereas it didn't back in March.
Yeah, that's good news.
Yes, yeah. So how we actually undertake viewings and things for the next month, I don't think it will be very different to what it's been up to now, apart from we were taking sort of one client, maximum of 2 clients out in a consultant's car. I don't think we'll do that anymore. I think we'll probably be meeting them at properties. I was speaking to an agent yesterday, obviously after the news broke at the weekend, just to sort of get some clarity on, and I spoke to a few agents on how they're working, and things like check-ins I think will change. I think that they'll do their check-in separately, and then the client will pick up the keys and the inventory, or our consultant will, you know, so there'll be fewer people in the property, and it'll be sort of a bit more remote, but, you know, nothing too onerous.
It does sound like this is going to be different. Interestingly, though, we've just been had to be working on lobbying the government, and one of the things that they've been looking at, the lobbyist who's in charge of that project has said, you know, we need a clear policy that's, and obviously we've got one for Euro, which you saw a few months ago. But it's interesting that you say that about, you know, these rules about check-ins, one person in a car, those are going to become really quite fundamental. And it's not like we're getting that guidance from government.
No, exactly. I mean, we relied on, first of all, when it happened in March, we started putting together our own guidance for working based on what the rules were at that time when we started coming out of lockdown in June and July. And then thankfully Euro, you put together some guidance as well, which was fantastic because that sort of solidified and consolidated what we were saying. But it is very much your own interpretation. I know a lot of relocation companies work very differently, so some won't have clients in the car at all. And also for us, it will very much depend on the individual consultants and what they're happy with, and we would always work along with that. We've done a lot more remote viewing for people, where they'd normally come over on home search days and then choose a property and go back and then come back. They obviously can't do that with quarantine, people being in quarantine as well. So there's been a lot more sharing of videos and links, and the consultants going out on their own and doing a video viewing for the client. We've done a lot of that lately.
And it really works. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
talking right at the beginning to Christine Martin in Barcelona, and she was saying, about that process that they've just implemented. It's different because you're not saying, look at the beautiful gardens and the kitchen.
Yeah.
You're saying,
Yeah.
you need to be aware there's a road here. You
Yeah.
need to be aware this is your only storage closet.
Yeah.
So it's the reality.
Yes. Yeah. You have to go much more into detail, probably, and what size is the fridge freezer, and
Right.
Things like that. I do feel sorry for the clients. It's very difficult, particularly if they've never been to the UK before. It's like, any of our Euro members, if they've never been to your country and you're trying to introduce them, it's not just about showing them houses, we're showing them areas and, talking to them about the UK and the culture and, all sorts of different things. So it is very difficult, but we have to adapt.
Exactly. And, from that point of view as well, I know, a lot of the companies have been really creative about things like that quarantine piece, because, it's difficult enough to settle in a country without going into a 14-day quarantine.
Yeah. I mean, I had a client, and I actually did the viewings myself because they were local, and we literally did the viewings, found the house, and we literally had it all set up for them to come move straight into, so they didn't have to quarantine. We had the broadband set up, we accepted delivery of their Sainsbury's or shopping, we were there for the handyman setting up all the beds and everything, and thankfully they love the house.
Right. Good. But this is what makes, I mean, again, we've had these conversations quite a lot over the full forum and various other things, but never before really has the true value of what our industry does really been seen so clearly.
Yes, yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. And I think, like you say, with the quarantine and also I think from businesses' point of view, they have to show that from a health and safety point of view, they're looking after their employees and their assignees. So it's even more important when you've got a worldwide pandemic going on, that is that you have proper support in place on the ground.
Oh gosh, it really, really is. And I mean, so just going back to what's happening in the UK, when before the lockdown was announced, where you're in Berkshire, which
so we were tier 1.
You were tier 1, yeah, we were too, which is the lowest, not the highest.
So there were 3 tiers in the UK. Tier 3 was basically no socialising. I have actually taken a snapshot on my phone because I couldn't remember what they all were. So tier 3 was pubs and bars shut, rule of 6 outside, so you couldn't mix inside, no staying overnight. I think businesses were still open, but all the hospitality industry was closed. Tier 2, which is the sort of middle tier, you couldn't mix with other households indoors, and it was sort of a in between. And then tier 1, which was us, it was you could mix inside and outside, but it was a maximum of 6. Pubs and restaurants were open. I went out a few times, and I just think that the pubs and the restaurants and the hospitality industries did a brilliant job.
I agree with you.
And that's what I think must be so frustrating for them, because I think that businesses like within the relocation industry, hospitality, all businesses are COVID secure now. They couldn't do any more.
Correct.
And people are safe, going into these businesses. It's other places that they're picking it up. And I feel very sorry for them, because I thought they did brilliantly the way they handled it all. The 10 p.m. curfew I thought was ridiculous, frankly, because everyone just left at the same time.
Exactly. So there you have it. You've created a crowd.
Yeah. So in the UK, it used to be last orders, so leaving at 11, but you had 20 minutes to get out, to stagger. stagger people,
exactly.
not stagger out, but to stagger people. And so sort of 11, but no, they said 10 o'clock. That's it, everyone out at the same time. It was just, I didn't really see what the thought process was.
I didn't either. And again, it's the kind of implementation of things like that. We took a very short few days by the coast, really close to here, about an hour from here, and it's relatively touristy in a very low-key way. Mm. 2 pubs in the village by the sea where we were staying both said they had been so careful and so busy between the end of lockdown and now that they had actually started to make up for all of the losses during lockdown. And then bang, here we are again.
Yeah.
And I just really feel for them. You know, they're so excited to be back and doing what they love. And
I can understand that the government are trying to cut down on the social aspect of people mixing and trying to keep business and schools open. I can understand.
Yes.
But equally, you know, I think there wasn't any proper statistics to show that people were picking up the virus in hospitality venues. I mean, obviously it's mixing with people, but I felt very sorry for them, really.
I agree, and it's a bit like with retail. We were having this conversation this morning, Ted and I. You know, the shops have all done so well to create the one-way systems, to have everyone behind, you know, barriers. Everyone is. I haven't seen anyone not wearing a mask in a shop for ages. So everyone's being super careful. So, and again, I just feel, you know, it's...
I mean, it was always going to happen that as we went into the winter, everyone knew there would be a second wave, as they called it, when the universities went back and the schools went back. You know, it's not because people are being deliberately have sort of let it go. It's just the natural cause of things. But we were talking about this earlier, weren't we, about, you know, flu would circulate in the same way. It's a virus. You have a flu jab for the vulnerable and the elderly, and you sort of keep them safe, and everyone else, you might catch flu, but generally speaking, you're not hospitalized.
That's right. That's it exactly. And
unless you're of a certain age group or you've got
where you are vulnerable. And we were talking a bit before as well about the Great Barrington Declaration. And you know how I do feel that it's become very politicized.
Yes, I do.
Which I didn't feel before. Back in March, I didn't think it was a political thing. Now
no. And it's like we were saying earlier, when Boris announced it on Saturday, I saw exactly, you know, he's got the graphs with everything shooting up, and you sort of think, yeah, fine, fair enough, protect the NHS, that's what we've got to do. We've got to just sort of, you know, keep it in check for a bit and sort of keep the routine appointments on the NHS going. But then you start sort of listening to other points of view and other information, and you start thinking, well, okay, where are they getting this 4,000 deaths a day from? And you start questioning it, and you start sort of thinking, actually, you know, they're not looking, I feel, at different perspectives. They seem to be down this sort of very tunnel vision way of, and it's like you said, you know, Sage, all the scientific and the health advisors, they'd lock everyone down because their main criteria is loss of life. Absolutely. They'd probably do it for the flu if there's a particularly bad flu bout. It's very difficult. I do think that people are starting to not necessarily believe what Boris says, because there's been quite a few U-turns, and if he says, well, it'll finish on the 2nd of December, will it? But equally, I do feel that he's between a rock and a hard place.
I agree. I agree. This is.
I don't think any government party would have done it better.
You know, and I'm fairly certain the euphoria that he was feeling this, you know, last year when he was elected on that huge landslide majority, that's died. I'm sure. So I wanted to ask you that actually, but I want to ask you 2 things before we say goodbye. First of all, how do you think the British public will take to this going on through Christmas, should that happen?
I don't think it will go down too well. And I think that people would break the rules anyway, and therefore they'd be far better to give advice on risk management, so they can sort of almost do their own risk assessment and say, look, we know you're going to do it, but if you do it safely, and here's what we would recommend, and you know, take some accountability for yourselves. So because I think people would break it anyway, and they're not going to be able to police it.
I mean, no.
As long as most people would be sensible at breaking it, you know, they'd do the 6 or 8 people or whatever, 2 family groups, they'd you know, probably pare it back to what they would normally. That's my friend's dog.
Hello.
Out of the window.
No, I agree. I think people would be sensible about it. I think in the majority.
There'd be the odd group, wouldn't there, where they get 30 in a house party being ridiculous. But I think the majority of people would be sensible. People are sensible. The majority of people I see wear masks, they wash their hands, they socially distance, you know. So I think they would. Sorry.
I agree with you. I mean, so just finally, right now we're going into this lockdown. You know, I'm talking to friends and colleagues. You're talking to friends and colleagues. What's your take on the national mood?
Well, it's funny because most people I speak to, first of all, you know, they thought, yes, we need to protect the NHS, and there's a lot of love out there in the UK. Everyone would do everything they can to protect the NHS, but equally, they're not necessarily thinking that a lockdown is the best way, and also it would be useful to have more information about where they're getting these figures from, you know, so that you could, for instance, do you get immunity from it? Or, you know, there's just all sorts of things that would help you understand the decision making more.
Manage your own risk, exactly.
Yes, and then on the one hand, I'd hear on the TV or radio that, you know, the majority of people, or over 50% of the nation, support a lockdown. And then on the other hand, I'd hear, you know, information saying that, you know, more people are worried about the effects of a lockdown than COVID. Yep. So you get 2 completely different viewpoints depending what survey they've done or what people they've spoken to. Generally speaking, though, I prefer not to have a lockdown, but we are where we are.
I mean, I agree with you. It's kind of like, on the one hand, I see the sense of it, and the other hand, I don't. And like you say, again, when it comes to the figures and the surveys, it's so important that that we are given the demographic of that survey. So if, for example, the demographic of that survey was people over 40, there's going to be a much greater risk aversion than there would be for people under 40, or people in business, or, you know,
And it's like I said to you earlier, Dom, you know, Liverpool was held out as one of the places that was worst affected by COVID. It had gone into tier 3, etc., before the national lockdown. Well, this morning I was listening to the radio, and it was on off government figures, off the COVID-19 government website, showing that actually cases and hospital admissions were going down in Liverpool, and they had been since before it went into tier 3. So, you know, it's what we come back to the media question, isn't it? It's very one-dimensional what we get fed. And it's only when you start listening to other viewpoints and perspectives, you know, the Barrington Declaration, for instance, you know, that's got terribly put down.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't hear about it in the media. It wasn't, and yet, you know, it's a very well-respected group of people that have put that together. And, you know, I wonder whether it's time to have a bit more diverse viewpoint on the SAGE committee.
Well, there's the anti-SAGE committee. That's very interesting. I read a lot of that on unheard.com, and they have a parallel set of scientists who give a different perspective. Quite often they are in agreement with same sex, you know, but quite often they're not.
Yes.
And over that Barrington thing, they were definitely in agreement with it's shelter and protection, and not the entire country.
Not entire. Yeah. So I don't know. If you speak to me tomorrow, I'd probably change my mind again.
Well, I'd say here.
What I've read or listened to.
I do like that the whole time. Jenny, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you. Let's do this again in January and see where we are after Christmas.
Yes.
Should we get one?
See how we got on, whether we had a Christmas meal or...
Absolutely, yeah. I tell you what, but very interestingly, just as an aside, this part of the country is very big for poultry farming, specifically turkeys. And they're all super worried, bless them, about the big turkeys, because no one's buying, you know,
of course.
have, you know, anyway, there we go.
Yes, of course. They all want little ones.
Little tiny turkeys, yeah. Listen, Jenny, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, as it always is. And we will catch up again.
Lovely.
Look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Dom.
Bye.
Bye.